Mark Reckless, former UKIP MP, just lost his seat recently. I mean, this is about freedom of religion. I mean, you might have extreme distaste for what people spout and what people believe, but these are British values, to let people believe those things and express those things, aren't they?
I agree, and there's a trade-off between freedom and security. But I also think just the sheer numbers of people who may wish us harm is incredibly difficult for the security services to deal with. And if you think of the numbers of people who come back, potentially having been radicalised in Syria, how on earth do we keep tabs on all those people? And actually part of the problem is to put someone under surveillance 24/7 costs perhaps £1 million a year, taking 15 or 20 people to do that 24/7. And when we looked at control orders and some of what was being done to people who hadn't been convicted but were felt by the security services to wish us harm, actually if you say to someone they have to stay in a certain place or they can't be in a particular area of the country with their associates, then it makes it much easier and frankly cheaper for the security services to keep tabs on more people who wish us harm than if you say you can't do that and you're not able to keep tabs on people unless you're prepared to pay £1 million a head to do so. There's a pragmatic issue here.
Roger Griffin.
I think tolerance is a key part of it, but I think we need to have a civic patriotism. Rather than sort of balkanising people into different...
Civic patriotism?
We need to have
something... For the UK civic patriotism?
To make people proud of being British.
Do the SNP have a civic patriotism?
To celebrate our history, to celebrate what our country did to bring freedom to the world.
And our persecutions and our 19th century...
There is good and bad in our history, but I am proud of what Britain has done through our history.
What do you mean by civic patriotism? Because, you know, the SNP don't have UK civic patriotism necessarily, and I mean, what about, OK, for example, I know they've been roundly condemned by UKIP, but you've had some representatives who have said some rum things in the past. You had that chap who said that the floods in Somerset were because of gay marriage.
Yes, and he said that while he was a Conservative for many years before, and no one took any notice.
And you've had the people who said all sorts of stuff. But those people, whether Conservatives or UKIP, whatever they are, they're contrary to British values. Are they radical preachers?
I think freedom of speech is part of what makes our country, and actually respecting that is incredibly important. And we need to say to people, actually, you know, we don't agree with what you say, but we, you know, allow your right to say that. We celebrate your right, actually, to say things we disagree with. And that is part of what pulls us together as a society, as a country, in which we should take pride in. And we shouldn't be shy about asserting and championing those British values of belief in tolerance, of belief in freedom of speech, and then comparing that to the values of those who wish us harm.
No, Rabia, Bob, we've not heard from Rabia yet. The future UKIP voters...
future UKIP MPs.
Of course, much more recently...
Mark Reckless, come in here.
People talk about colonialism of Libya from Stephen, but we shouldn't forget that it was Western EU, and particularly David Cameron and Nicolas Sarkozy, whose intervention and decision to go in and effectively remove Gaddafi from power in Libya that has created this ungoverned space from which these boats are coming. And 550 members of Parliament voted for that and decided it was a good idea without giving, frankly, a second thought to what the consequences would be. And we shouldn't forget that.
We have to remember...
I mean, I think it is worth looking at the idea of seeing what we can do to process people in North Africa, whether that's a question of setting up somewhere in Libya or perhaps paying or persuading the Tunisians or someone else to help do us. Because I think when people come to Italy, largely they disappear. I mean, I went to Calais. I met a chap called Peter who told me he'd come from Eritrea. He'd come through the Sahara, through Libya, to Lampedusa. The Italians then moved him to Sicily and then onwards and just left him at the railway station at Bologna, and then he came through to Calais. And actually, the Europeans, they're not actually working as Schengen. They're not protecting their borders. And the EU had this ridiculous idea that we'll replace this Italian Operation Mare Nostrum that's trying to rescue people with Triton, where actually we purposefully don't rescue people to disincentivise them. Yeah. That was a very bad thing, and now what the EU are trying to do is again use this human tragedy as a power grab so the EU takes control of the whole immigration and asylum system. We oppose that. I think it would be a complete mess if they do that.
Stephen,
and we have to try and do this sensibly, bilaterally, working together as democracy.
Douglas, Stephen, hold fire. Let's go to... Mark Reckless, of course, Nigel Farage condemned any intervention in Syria, and also he advocated that we should take refugees, specifically Christians, didn't he? That was what should the leader of UKIP's policy be? Who will the leader of UKIP be, by the way?
Our leader is Nigel Farage, and I completely agree with what he said, indeed. And to say that, not withdrawing from the UN Convention on Refugees, keeping our commitments there, but in addition to that, and we don't pretend this will be a huge number, but we would like to give some support to the Christian refugees in Syria, who in many circumstances don't have anywhere else to go.
Dawn really wants to come in.
I just know.
I do have, actually, you raise a very interesting point. If the Christians of Syria were fleeing en masse in the same percentage as the Sunni Muslim moderates were, I think there would be a great deal more sympathy in Syria. But the facts are that the Christian minorities are still being protected by the Assad government. And so they're not fleeing, and so we're not getting all these stories about Christians.
But many of the Christians are in areas that aren't controlled by
Is that true, Douglas Murray?
A lot of Christians have been fleeing. If you go to the Syriac Christian churches in London, you can see this. They're absolutely overflowing at the moment.